is Between the Ears. I'm Schuyler Callihan, and we are almost to the game day here. It's West Virginia, Central Florida this Saturday, noon kickoff on FS1. And I'm not surprising anybody by saying this, but this is a must-win game here for the Mountaineers as they sit 4-3 on the season and 2-2 in Big 12 conference play. And it seems like this team is reeling right now. They're trying to search for answers defensively. The offense finally got going after the bye week against Houston. That carried over last week against Oklahoma State. But the defense has gone MIA. And I'm not exactly sure if there is a perfect formula to get them back on track. But we're going to try and figure that out here today as we go over our keys to the game and how WVU beats Oklahoma State. That's really where we're going to pretty much put most of our emphasis or our focus here on today's show. We'll dabble a little bit into the offensive side. We really touched a lot of this stuff here on the Walkthrough Game Day show yesterday. But want to kind of get some more in depth here with some of this stuff, look at some of the numbers and try and figure out what West Virginia has to do in order to beat Central Florida on Saturday. So let's start with, again, let's go to the defensive side. The pressure has been really kind of non-existent over the last 2 weeks. And I think Neil did a really good job of kind of explaining as to why that pressure has been MIA, if you will, over the last 2 weeks. Houston, they just did not play well. And after he made these comments about how they didn't play well against Houston, and then the Oklahoma State game, how they get the ball out quick. That's just how they operate. I went back and rewatched both of those games, and it's pretty much exactly what Neil was talking about. The front seven for the Houston game, I did not see consistent pressure. I didn't see consistent push. Even in the run game, they were not dominating the line. They weren't winning the line. Occasionally, you would see maybe Eddie Vestorinen or somebody would win their one-on-one matchup, but the rest of the guys were getting tied up in blocks. They weren't getting off. They weren't shedding and just couldn't make plays. They were not getting enough shove up front, which is why you saw really the linebackers play really poorly in that game. And they were getting blocked up. The offensive line was getting downhill. They were getting to that second level quick. And it was just a bad game defensively. And you go to the Oklahoma State game, and it was really, really bad in terms of tackling. I think there were some instances where they could have been put in better positions by Jordan Leslie, but I don't want to put much blame on Jordan for that, because I would say probably 75 to 85% of the time they had the right call in or the right coverage or whatever. They had guys in the area. They had guys that could have made plays at or behind the line of scrimmage, and they just didn't. They didn't execute. They were taking terrible angles, poor pursuit, bad technique, overshooting things off the edge, and they were getting sucked in on the read game, which was I don't really understand because Bowman's not much of a running threat, but there was just a lot of bad in that Oklahoma State game, especially, as you can imagine, especially in that fourth quarter. Ollie Gordon those two runs just replay in my head, and I still can't for the life of me understand how he goes untouched, basically untouched, on both of those two big runs that he ripped off in that quarter. So how do you fix it? Well, it's back to the basics. It's literally just drilling fundamentals, drilling technique, and simplifying things, maybe from a game plan perspective, from a role perspective. Guys have to do less. If they're starting to do more and it's not working, or even if you're just doing what you've been doing all season long and all of a sudden it's not working because you may have some different personnel out there. Obviously at linebacker, you have Ben Cutter out there as a true freshman. It can be a lot. So I think the one thing Leslie can do this week, and I think it's probably already been implemented, is that they're going to do a little bit more of a, I wouldn't say vanilla defense. They're still going to draw up some exotic looks and try and confuse UCF and John Rice Plumlee, but they're going to do some things that aren't really that complicated for the defensive players to really kind of execute or do. It's going to be, here's your role, and that's what you're going to do. Very plain and simple. And it's not probably going to be as much feeling out where you may have linebackers who kind of have a call, pre-snap, or just kind of judging based off of what the offense is looking at, where, okay, you may or may not drop. I think it's going to be very clear cut to the defense as to what they need to do. So when I look at UCF and their offense, I mean, my goodness, there is just speed everywhere. Where do you start? I mean, really, because it's all over the place, from RJ Harvey, Johnny Richardson, both in the backfield. You got Javon Baker, Kobe Hudson at receiver. Those are just the top four guys. I mean, and I can go on, but those four guys alone are problems. And any one of them can beat you vertically. They can beat you in space. They can just beat you by running right by you. And I think Gus Malzahn understands. He's a very smart offensive coach in terms of scheming up the runs and finding ways to get the running game going. That's what they live off of, is the run game. They average 232 yards a game on the ground. That's second in the Big 12. Essentially tied for first, in my opinion. They're only 0.3 yards behind. I believe it's Kansas State at 232.7. But he understands, look, when you flip that tape on, you see guys just playing with poor technique and not tackling well, not taking great angles, and just kind of playing like your hair's on fire and no control. He's gonna love seeing that when he sees that on tape. So they're gonna do everything they can to get the ball out quick, because they can take some of that game plan that Oklahoma State had last week in terms of just getting the ball out quick. Because I mean, it's not a secret. Like, if you just get the ball out quick, it doesn't matter what type of edge rushers you have, what type of interior pass rushers you have. It doesn't matter, because the ball's out. There's nothing those guys can do. You take them out of the game. You take that element out of the game, and now you have the advantage. And I don't know that West Virginia's defensive line really has a distinct advantage over UCF's offensive line. I mean, I think when you look at the depth, you could potentially say that they have a small edge. But again, as I assume the game plan will be for Gus Malzahn, is to get the ball out quick if they're going to throw the ball. And then all of a sudden, you're taking those guys out of the game. You're taking Eddie V out of the game. You're taking Tomiwa Durjaye out of the game. You're taking Jalen Thornton out of the game. You're taking Sean Martin out of the game. And you're putting those speed guys in open field situations where they just got to beat Beanie Bishop and Andrew Wilson-Lamp or whoever's out there. Marcus Floyd at safety. That's going to be what they want to do. So if you're Jordan Leslie, the best way to attack this is probably funnel everything inside. You want everything to kind of go toward Lee Koba, go toward Ben Cutter. And that's probably the best thing anyways, at least right now, for Cutter, because he's a young linebacker that's still trying to learn this level of college football, or this level of football. And his best thing is just to go out there and make tackles, not to think. Just go out there, play, make tackles, make plays, and odds are you're probably going to get the results that you want. So if you can find a way to funnel those guys inside, number one, you're funneling them to your best tackler on the team in Koba, and you're eliminating some confusion, or you're eliminating some, disadvantages with Cutter out in space. So again, UCF's going to dictate this. They're going to dictate how they run their offense and kind of how the game flows when they have the ball, obviously. But if you're Leslie, you want to shut down the outsides, take away the screen game, take away the quick passes, take away the jet sweeps or just the quick slants. You've got to be able to find a way to make John Rice Plumlee throw the ball over the middle of the field. And you've got to find a way to make RJ Harvey and Johnny Richardson run in between the tackles. Now, again, these guys are small, they're slippery, they're hard to tackle. So even running them inside is not necessarily going to be a guarantee for success, but you like your odds much better when they're going into the teeth of that defense that for the most part this season has been their strength. Okay, obviously the secondary has always been kind of a concern. And you like your chances better with those guys running into the thick of that defense rather than on the outside where the corners and the safeties have to make plays and hold the edge. That to me is going to be the key, is funneling everything inside. The second key for me defensively, I think for WVU has to be, where do I want to go here? Let's go with first down defense, because last week it was not great. They were Oklahoma State, I believe, was averaging around 7-ish yards on first down. And if you're getting into 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1, hell, even 2nd and 4, I mean, that's putting yourself in a very, very tough spot to get 2 stops in a row and get off the field. You've got to be able to put them in 2nd and longs. And again, with how good this team runs the football, it's not like you're going to get them in 2nd and 15 very often, or you're not going to get them in 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 9 very often, because naturally they're not going to throw the ball 50 times a game. So they're not going to drop back a ton. And when they do run, they know how to run the dang ball, obviously, and they're going to fall forward and at least get positive yardage. The thing you need to eliminate is getting into those 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2s and 1s. So even if you operate at a 2nd and medium, 2nd and 5 or 6, I mean, it sounds like we're splitting hairs here, but it makes a world of difference. So they have to do that, because not only is it putting you in a better position, but it's also putting the opposing offense in a tougher spot. And UCF on the season, they're 4th in the Big 12, converting 45.1% of their third down attempts. No surprise when you run the ball as well as they do, because they get into those 3rd and shorts. And if they get into these 3rd and shorts consistently, it's going to be potentially a long day. So when they do drop back to pass, you got to hope that you've got some sort of a, free blitzer coming off the edge. You've got some interior pressure being generated to push the nose of the pocket, something to where you can affect the pass to where it goes over the middle, or you can get to Plumlee and get a sack, because that's probably going to be the best way you keep them out of these 2nd and 2s and 3s and so on. So third down is going to be a huge key. But again, the key to that is getting a better position on 2nd down, which they did not do very well last week at all against Oklahoma State. The last thing I will probably say about the defense is probably going to be, I could go a number of ways here, but I don't want to spend all day on the defense. I would say the field position game is going to be huge. It proved to be last week. They were horrendous in terms of getting good field position. And even when they got stops, I mean, Oklahoma State was getting the midfield or even plus territory and backed West Virginia up, I don't know how many times. And it was kind of the case in the Houston game a little bit as well. This offense for West Virginia, I mean, yes, they've kind of pieced some things together over the last couple of weeks, but this is not an offense engineered to go 90-plus yards multiple times a game, or 80-plus yards multiple times a game. You have to get some 3 and outs, or even if it's not a 3 and out, get a quick stop. If they get a first down, whatever. Don't let them get to the 45 near midfield or even the 40. if you can get them to get off the field in time to where you can get the ball, I would say on the better side of your 20, then that's where you want to live. Um, as cliche as it sounds, I mean it's just plain simple football that West Virginia just didn't do last week. Really, the last 2 weeks, they're setting themselves up for long drives, and that's just not how this offense is engineered to go. So help the offense. The offense will help you. Moving over to the offensive side, the offensive line is going to be challenged in this game. You look at UCF's front; it's not the best from top to bottom in the league by any means, and you could even take them as a whole as a starting unit, and it's still probably not top 3 or 4 in the league, but they've got two bad dudes up front. And we mentioned this on the Walk to Game Day show. Tremont Morris Brash, Malachi Lawrence, the two combined have 11 sacks on the season, and Brash leads the Big 12 with 13 tackles for loss. These two just wreak havoc. So last week with Garrett Green, we saw some more downfield things. We saw Devin Carter. We saw E.J. Horton. We saw a bunch of attempts, or at least a bunch of play calls where there was designs to go deep down the field or over the middle of the field. Don't know if that's going to happen this week. UCF's going to play some man coverage, actually probably a lot of man coverage. So you can take those shots. Are they going to be necessarily crazy designs? Probably not. It's probably going to be just your go balls and whatnot. But when they're able to get to the quarterback, you can play man coverage all day. And that's why Garrett Green's probably going to live underneath and in the intermediate in this game, because you've got to account for those two guys up front. And if you go off of 2 weeks ago, offensive line didn't play well against Houston at all. Zach Frazier did not play his best game. Go to the Oklahoma State game. It was okay. It was better than Houston, in my opinion, but we'll see. The good news is you're potentially getting Tomas Remack back this week, and that should help. So he's got to be able to complete some of these layup passes, which has been a very big problem for him this season. Chad Scott said it earlier in the week. That's probably his number one, I wouldn't say issue, but that's probably the number one thing that he needs to get ironed out. Because if he can't complete those layups that the defense is giving him, whether it's 4 or 5 yards, it's going to be hard for this team to move the football. That's why you're seeing Garrett's completion percentage around 51, 52%, because a lot of these passes are either having to happen downfield or on third down, where there's going to be pressure, and he's got to get the ball out, and sometimes you just got to throw it. So to me, I think it's going to have to be, he's got to complete these layups, and the receivers are going to have to make plays in space, which they really haven't done much of all this season, which is concerning. The run game, which will be the last thing I touch on, I think you're going to see it be more of a by committee approach, because I think the coaching staff is realizing, look, CJ Donaldson is best when he is fresh. And right now, that kid is not fresh. At least it looks like it on tape. He is not running the same way he ran against Pitt. He's not running the same way he ran. What game was it? Either Texas Tech or TCU. I can't remember which one it was. I get them mixed up. But he's not. Fact of the matter is, he's not running the way he was earlier in the season. And Justin Johnson, the way he played last week, he's not absorbed a ton of hits this season because he's been out. He's going to get some more carries. I think Jaheim White will get some more looks. Jalen Anderson could potentially get more looks as well. So it's going to be a by-committee approach. The thing with this is, though, they've got to be able to understand and recognize when to have certain guys on the field, have the right personnel on the field. There's times last week I was scratching my head when CJ Donaldson was on the field, and particularly for certain play calls, certain run schemes. I understand CJ is their go-to back, but there's some run schemes or run plays that are probably not best designed for CJ. And I think they probably need to go back and evaluate those plays, um, and try and find a way to. That's where you get Jaheim White on the field. That's where you get Justin Johnson on the field or Jalen Anderson. So they've got to do a better job of, I think, managing those and not getting CJ so gassed early on, because we've seen it to where he's got like 10, 11, 12, 13 carries in the first half. Second half, he's just not effective at all. If you space those out a little bit, it should lead to a more productive outing for him, for the rest of the running back room, and the offense as a whole. So West Virginia's got their work cut out for them this week. They really do. The 0-4 Knights of UCF are more challenging than they appear on paper, I promise you. And this has kind of the makings of a game that could get into the 30s again. So if the defense fails to get good field position for the offense, if they fail to clean up their tackling issues from the last 2 weeks, who knows? West Virginia could be staring at a 4-4 record by Saturday evening. So that's going to do it here for me today on Between the Ears. This is our last episode of the week, and we will be back, though, on Saturday to recap West Virginia UCF on the Mountaineers Now postgame show. I have Gene with me, Eugene Napoleon, West Virginia great legendary running back. He'll be on the show with me. So make sure you hit that subscribe button at Mountaineers Now. Follow us on X at Mountaineers Now also. And we'll see you guys on Saturday. Take care.